electric grid here in New York. And I'll also talk about some of what's needed for the transformation of our electric grid in order to meet our decarbonization goals. I'll also talk a little bit about some of the myths regarding the electric grid. And I'll talk a little bit about the Building Code Council as it is relevant. I will then, I think at that point, move on to questions and answers. So thanks, everybody. I'm really glad to be here. A little bit about myself. I am originally from New York City, Park Slope, Brooklyn. Spent a little bit of time in Buffalo, New York for law school, and have lived the last 10 years in Albany, New York. So I have some experience with different regions of the state. I worked at the New York State Assembly as Assistant Secretary to the Speaker with jurisdiction over the Energy Committee, the ENCON Committee, Corporations Committee, and Local Government Committee. And within that role, I would meet with stakeholders and legislators, draft legislation, and shepherd that legislation through the legislative process, and ultimately negotiate with the executive and the Senate on a final piece of legislation. I was one of the lead negotiators for the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act in 2019. After the Assembly, I worked at the Dormitory Authority as the Intergovernmental Relations Director. The Dormitory Authority, as you may know, finances and constructs New York State's infrastructure. So we issue the bonds, and then we hire the contractors, and we move those projects forward. And so I did that for a number of years, and then was really happy to come on to join Rewiring America in their electrification advocacy work. Rewiring America was founded in 2020 with the simple idea: electrify everything. Its founders included a consultant to the Department of Energy who mapped out our entire energy ecosystem, including the supply side, where are the coal plants, nuclear, hydropower, solar and wind, etc., and all of the machines that we use on the demand side of the equation. And Rewiring America focuses on us, the end users of a lot of energy, because we are crystal clear on the win-win-win. We want lower energy costs from the gas pump to our utility bills, healthier homes, producing fewer asthma-causing emissions, and a reduced impact on the climate, because we can actually zero out the emissions we generate with the machines that we use in our daily lives. 87% of US emissions come from energy use. The rest of our climate impacts are from soil management practices, livestock farming, and the use of refrigerants. So this includes the cars we drive, how we heat our homes and water, how we cook our food, how we dry our clothes, and where our electricity comes from. 42% of our energy-related emissions come from decisions made around the kitchen table nationally. In New York, buildings are our largest source of greenhouse gas emissions, responsible for 32% of the emissions across the state. So the gas furnace breaks. Do we repair it and limp along? Do we replace it with a new gas furnace and lock in carbon pollution for another 20 years? Or do we take the opportunity to install a cheaper to operate and better for the planet heat pump? 70% of Americans are concerned about climate change, but haven't had a place to go to find out what they can do. This should be a source of optimism. We as individual Americans can make a bigger difference than many of us thought. We don't need to invent new technology to make the change. We just need to plan for and motivate the change. We already know how to produce clean electricity, and because of government incentives, just like we made in fossil fuels, it's increasingly become the cheapest electricity source. You may be able to purchase wind, solar, or hydropower, or put your own solar panels, or tap into a geothermal energy network. But that's the supply side. On the demand side, and this is the part most of us don't really think about other than with cars, to fully decarbonize our homes, we need to replace or install approximately 1 billion machines across 121 million households by 2050, including 100 million space heating machines. So great news, the Inflation Reduction Act will jumpstart this movement. The law provides.
Please mute while Mike.
Please mute.
No, this must have had a time.
Maybe.
See if I can pause.
I thought that would be better.
Would everyone please mute? Sorry, Michael, go ahead.
No problem. So the great news is,
I don't know who's hosting, but they can mute everybody and then turn Michael back on, and that'll solve the problem.
Yeah, I realize that. I'm trying to find the button at this point to mute. My apologies. I can't seem to find it. I'm looking at the security.
The offender's taken care of, so we can probably just continue.
Yes,
okay.
for now.
So the great news is that the Inflation Reduction Act will jumpstart this movement. The law provides rebates, tax credits, grants, and low-cost financing for electric appliances, while at the same time offering powerful incentives on the supply side for renewable sources. We have $858 billion in electric potential to leverage if we make the most of what's in the Inflation Reduction Act. The average American household will receive $10,600 in IRA benefits to fully electrify. This money is available to homeowners and renters alike, but only if we make it so. 27% of households have heard of electrification, and 50% of Americans have heard of the IRA. We need to up our pace of progress. So just taking a step back, what does it mean to electrify? To electrify everything, you need to replace any machine that currently burns fossil fuels with new efficient electric ones. It might also mean installing new machines like solar panels or a home energy storage battery. This doesn't have to happen all at once. In fact, it's usually more efficient to replace appliances as they age out. Through a variety of electrification incentives, the IRA empowers American households to save thousands of dollars on upfront costs that come with electrification. That's why Rewiring America launched the IRA Savings Calculator last year to show everyday Americans how they can use the Inflation Reduction Act to go electric. You just put in your income, your household size, and some additional information, and you'll get personalized info on how much free money you can get for your electrification journey. So when it comes to understanding the IRA, there's just a few simple things you need to keep in mind. First, some federal incentives like the tax credits are available right now, and others like the rebates are still being finalized and will roll out by the end of this year into next year. And you can follow the timing of the updates on our website, rewiringamerica.org. Second, your IRA bank account is a mixture of upfront discounts and rebates right where you buy electric appliances, tax credits that you can claim later, and low-cost financing. Your income determines the particular makeup of your bank account. Lastly, use our calculator to get an overview of the money available to you and start thinking about your plan. This is key because sometimes you'll need to do a bit of preparatory work to start electrifying, and you'll need to find contractors who know how to help you install your electric goods. The top lines are the IRA consumer-facing incentives will help you make a switch to electric appliances, purchase electric vehicles, and install rooftop solar. Also, while it might not be consumer-facing, it's important to note that the IRA includes significant funding for rental and multifamily housing to go electric. So here's a recap of all the incentives. You can get electrification rebates, energy efficiency rebates, electrification and energy tax credits, solar and storage tax credits, and EV tax credits. If you like, at the end of the conversation, I can go into more detail about IRA incentives. And also, I will just put in the chat here a link to our IRA guide for those who want to do a little bit more research on their own. So the Climate Act in New York requires that 70% of statewide electricity comes from renewable energy sources by 2030, called 70 by 30, and that the state achieve zero emission electricity system by 2040, 100 by 40. The scoping plan anticipates annual electricity demand will more than double by 2050, depending on the scale and timing of electrification, and whether there are other clean alternatives for the transportation and building sectors. New York's electricity sector comprises of traditional fossil fuel fired power generation facilities and nuclear generation facilities, along with clean energy generation such as wind, solar, hydropower, and energy storage, as well as transmission infrastructure. In 2021, renewable resources accounted for approximately 27% of the state's electricity generation. Meanwhile, nuclear resources contributed about 24% of the electricity generation in the state. Fossil fuel generation, including fossil natural gas, oil, and dual fuel generation, produced more than 47% of statewide electricity. The reliance on coal has decreased significantly in recent years, with the last remaining coal-fired power plant closed in 2020, following New York State's DEC's adoption of a revisions to our codes to establish carbon dioxide emission limits for existing power plants. So here's a depiction of our current capacity on our electric grid. You can see that projected for the summer of 2023, that we are going to have a peak demand of 32,000 megawatts. So on our hottest day, when everything electric is going full blast, we will have a peak demand of 32,000 megawatts. That's what's anticipated. We have a current capacity of 40,000 megawatts, a little bit over 40,000 megawatts. And so we keep in reserve about 6,000, a little over 6,500 megawatts just for emergencies, just in case. So we really have an overhead between our peak demand on our hottest day and our generating capacity of about over 8,000 megawatts. Now, just to put this into perspective, 1 megawatt will provide energy for 800 to 1,000 homes. We build new homes, approximately 40,000 new homes a year, which equals about 40 megawatts. So you can kind of get a sense from this of how much energy capacity we actually have based on where our current transmission is. So remember that currently our capacity to generate energy is at over 40,000 megawatts, and our current demand, peak demand, is only 32,000 megawatts. Now, if you look at what's forecasted for electrification between now and 2050, you can see that from 2022 all the way up until, depending upon our level of electrification, all the way up to 2030, we don't even see an increase in our electrification demand. And some of that has to do with the fact that when we electrify our buildings, we actually are not buildings really, when we electrify our buildings, that really adds load to the winter, not to the summer. And so right now we are a summer peaking state. And so when we electrify our homes, we add load to the winter. And so we won't actually see that until such time that we start to consume more electricity during the winter. But from now all the way until 2030, depending upon it, it could be 2035. We're talking 12, 15 years. We're not going to see a lot of increase in our demand on our electrification grid. And we certainly have the capacity, even now, without even adding anything on, to meet those demands for the foreseeable future. Now, clearly, when we talk about getting all the way out to 2050, when we talk about 30 years from now, we do need to increase our transmission and our generation. We will need to move forward with increasing our generation and transmission. So you can see the green line is a high demand policy scenario. That means that we have moved very aggressively towards electrifying our homes and our vehicles, and we are now, mostly electric. But we have not done energy efficiencies. We haven't done demand response. We haven't done managed energy. We're really just using energy in any way for all purposes all the time. And so that you can see by 2050, we would need to more than double our energy generation in order to meet that. The lower demand policy scenario, which would go up to about 45,000 megawatts by 2050, is if we include managed electrification. So for example, a lower demand policy scenario assumes higher percentages of plug-in electric vehicles practice managed charging to avoid charging during peak demand periods. The higher demand policy scenario reflects a greater degree of unmanaged charging that can contribute to a higher peak. So that's some of the different, and then the baseline forecast is what the NISO, what we're sort of projecting as going to be our energy demand between now and 2050. Electrification of the transportation and building sectors will drive winter peak demand higher in the future. In fact, only 10% of New York's homes rely on electricity for heat today. So to meet the state's policy targets, that level would need to grow by 90% by 2050. With electric heat pumps considered the leading technology to convert fossil fuel-based furnaces and boilers, as heat pump technology proliferates, peak demand in New York's grid is expected to shift from summer to winter. And you can see that starts to happen here around 2035, 2034. And that's when we start to move to increase our peak demand a little bit more aggressively based on the electrification of winter homes. And remember, right now, at this current period, we have over 40,000 megawatts of generating capacity. And so it doesn't really become an issue until almost 2040, 20 years from now. So this is an important reference point. So if you look at the top charts, those are the reference charts, and that shows if we don't change anything from what we're doing today, if we don't change the fuels that we're using, then basically we will continue to use natural gas and gasoline in order to meet our final energy demand, and our energy demand will stay the same. It won't go down. Whereas you look at the accelerated transition away from combustion. Now, this is scenario 3 on the bottom chart. You can see with electrification, we actually reduce our final energy demand in half. And so electrifying actually cuts our total energy demand in half through our energy efficiency models. But then you can see in the lower right chart that today in 2020, electricity only makes up 20% of the final energy demand today. Whereas in 2050, when we've transitioned away from combustion, it will be almost 70% of our final energy demand. So electricity will make up 70% of what is then half of what the energy demand, total energy demand is today. So that I think is an interesting thing to point out. The current annual system expenditure, the costs related to energy consumption in the state to support New York's population and the economy is estimated to be over $140 billion a year. So every year we spend $140 billion to maintain our energy system. This estimate includes capital investments for energy consuming devices, liquid and gas fuel costs, and costs for in-state and imported electricity generation. While system expenditures are significant at over $140 billion, these make up a small share of the gross state product, about 8.9% in 2020. Of these total system expenditures, annual energy expenditures are approximately $50 billion, with over half of that amount, almost $30 billion, estimated to leave New York State. Petroleum fuel expenditures are the single largest category at approximately $24 billion. Current energy expenditures outline the opportunity for import substitution through electrification. So instead of going out of state to get our energy, we can produce our energy in state, create jobs in state that and that will revive our economies. For the import substitution through electrification, there's a greater share of energy services is provided by in-state resources, driving economic activity and job creation. So here we have our cost categories. So what is it that we're paying for when we make the transition away from our current energy system, our electric system, to the one that we envision? The costs include incremental capital and operating costs for electricity generation and transmission, the distribution systems, transportation investments. We'll need to invest in capital and operating expenses in the transportation, including battery for electric vehicles and EV chargers. We'll need to invest in our buildings. This includes incremental capital and operating expenses in buildings. We need to buy those heat pumps and those building upgrades. And so those are some of the cost categories when we think about what are we paying for with our current energy system. Now, here you can see if we didn't do anything, to move away from our current electric grid to our new electric grid, the cost of inaction exceeds the cost of action. So we talked about how we will have to pay to actually make this transition, but we will actually have to pay more to not make the transition. And it exceeds the cost of action by more than $115 billion. There are significant investments required to achieve the Climate Act greenhouse gas emission limits, accompanied by an even greater external benefits and opportunities to create hundreds of thousands of jobs. So you can see here, based on how quickly we electrify, the net benefits range from 115 billion to 130 billion. Improvements in air quality, increased active transportation, and energy efficiency interventions in low and moderate income homes generate health benefits ranging from approximately 155 billion to 160 billion, whereas reduced greenhouse gas emissions avoid the economic impacts of damages caused by climate change, equaling approximately 240 to 255 billion dollars. The combined benefits range from 400 billion to 415 billion dollars in benefits that we do. So here you can really see the difference between what it costs to make the transition and what it costs not to make the transition. The costs that we will for not making the transition are really going to be, what are the climate change impacts to our society, and what are the impacts on health that we have to pay for, continue to pay for. So in order to transform, we'll need to transform our power generation. Given the large amount of renewable energy that must be procured and developed to reach the Climate Act requirements, the state needs to incorporate load flexibility and controllability into the electric grid as sectors electrify to create a more manageable system. We need to enhance the grid. While the transformation of the power sector is critical to achieving the state's goals and requirements, it also presents an opportunity to make enhancements to the grid. Enhancements can improve efficiency, delivery, and reliability of electricity, and they can facilitate the integration of renewable energy and prioritize clean resources consistent with the Climate Act. And we need to invest in new technology. To achieve 70 by 30, we need to focus on energy delivery energy efficiency, and aggressive deployment of existing renewable energy and energy storage technologies. I'll just mention that New York, pursuant to the climate law, will add an additional 6,000 megawatts of distributed solar by 2025, 10,000 megawatts of distributed solar by 2030, 3,000 megawatts of battery storage by 2030, and 9,000 megawatts of offshore wind by 2035. So where we have capacity now of 40,000 megawatts, you can see we're adding all of these other sources of clean, green energy as we are retiring those fossil fuel power plants. Now, what about power outages? Many fossil fuel heating appliances rely on electric subsystems. So they require electricity to work. Gas furnaces on the market today still need electricity to power their electronics and fans. So they don't necessarily increase household resiliency, but electrified new technologies are coming onto the market that will keep electric machines running when the grid goes down. Electrification, therefore, has the potential to increase household energy reliability as more homes install solar plus battery systems with islanding capacity, and as more consumers purchase electric vehicles that can be used as backup energy systems. I'll mention that the Climate Action Council has adopted the scoping plan, which provides for our pathway forward, moving closer to achieving our greenhouse gas emission goals. And I'll just mention that the building sector is the largest source of greenhouse gas pollution in 2019, responsible for 32% of emissions statewide. We did pass the All Electric Buildings Act this year, which requires that all newly constructed buildings are prohibited from installing fossil fuel combustion systems and equipment for certain size buildings on certain timelines. I'll just mention to you that the Building Code Council is the group that's responsible for maintaining the standards for our buildings. They're made up of 17 members. Currently, there are about 15 members. There's 2 vacancies. And they are right now voting on the update to the building code. The New York State Building Code only comes out every 5 years. And so it's imperative that the Building Code Council include the electrification laws that have been enacted in the last 3 years, including the Climate Act, the Advanced Building Codes and Standards Act, and the All Electric Buildings Act. And I'll just mention that this Friday, on June 23rd, at 10 o'clock, the Building Code Council is meeting to discuss this update to the building code standards. If you want to attend, you can attend remotely and encourage council members to enact that to update the building code so that our buildings are electrified, energy efficient, and more resilient. In the chat, I put a post to a link where you can register, pre-register, and where you can testify remotely and talk to the members about this matter. I'll also put some talking points in the chat once we're done. And so at that point, I think I will stop. I think I'm at that 40-minute mark. And so I'll open it up to questions.
All right. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. This is Janet Lenachek with Sierra Club, Niagara. And I apologize for the rough start. I think we had a little bit of confusion and technical issues on my end. This is a learning curve with the technology. So I would ask that people put up their hands, and I see one hand up. That's Chris Berger. Chris, do you want to unmute yourself? You should be able to. And if it's not working, I will see if I can unmute you. Let's see. All right, try again.
Okay, yeah, it was giving me a message that the host was not allowing participants to unmute, but I guess you got that. Okay, thank you. Michael, good presentation. I'll say up front that actually I've been at basically zero fossil footprint for over 10 years with my house. And you're right, it's all about electrifying everything. The last thing to go was my stove. I did not like electric stoves per se. They're inefficient to begin with. But with the induction stove, even though my gas stove still had many years left, I got tired of saying, well, I'm almost completely electrified. So I finally just ditched my my gas stove for an induction stove, even though my gas stove still had plenty of life left. Anyway, so I'm thinking a lot going forward will entail. You mentioned it very briefly, islanding capacity, which in my mind conjures up microgrids. In a sense, my house is a microgrid in of itself. But it seems like that's the direction we need to be going. But I hear very little talk about how we're going to create these microgrids. And just to say, I think microgrids are the most stable way of doing it, and we're reducing transportation of electricity when we go microgrid route. But what's on the table to promote microgrids?
Great question. I think the Climate Act sort of required the creation of the Climate Action Council, which was made up of basically of advisors from different sectors of the economy, and they put together a scoping plan, which was approved in December of 2022. And the plan certainly relies heavily on electrification and microgrids. And so I think that is part of the planning process. That is our way forward for both clean energy and also reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. In the enacted budget that happened this year, we empowered the New York Power Authority to move forward with electrification projects, where they will be able to enter into contracts and move forward with those types of projects as well. And so I think there are a number of different sorts of things. One, and I think also thermal energy networks is also one of those types of programs that are moving forward and will achieve those things as well.
It just seems like, well, I'm still connected to the grid on purpose for me to purchase and install a self-contained storage capacity for all the electricity I use would, I think, be cost prohibitive at this point. But I'm sort of envisioning, well, how about if I wanted to get with all my neighbors and develop a neighborhood microgrid, which would include some storage. Is there a pathway to do that at this juncture?
What you're talking about, I think, reminds me a little bit of like community solar,
Yeah.
like those kinds of projects, and I think that those are, moving forward. I think NYSERDA has incentives for those kinds of projects as well, and I think the Power Authority is authorized to actually provide low cost energy to those types of networks or projects, like those community solar projects.
Not surprising, the
Chris?
utilities are kind of fighting it. But
Chris, this is Janet. I think we're gonna have to move on to the next question. Otherwise, I apologize. We're gonna be
No,
here until 9
was it.
o'clock. Okay. I think Joe was next. I'm not certain. Is Joe still there?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good.
Oh, you're okay? Okay. And Bill, you were next.
Yes, hi, Mike. Thank you for the very informative presentation. And my question is, the Sierra Club worked hard on getting this New York Heat Act passed this year, but it looks like it won't. And it looks maybe as if maybe even Speaker Hasty, was not as enthusiastic about it by, shunting it to some committee that, wouldn't, instead of bringing it to the floor. What's your opinion on that?
Well, I think first off, we appreciate the hard work and advocacy that the Sierra Club did on New York Heat. Rewiring America is also a strong advocate for New York Heat. And I think we were very excited to see it pass in the Senate for the first time. And so I think we have sort of seen some progress made and some milestones checked off. So I think there's a lot of excitement about that. I think that we've had conversations with Chairman Zabrowski from the Corporations Committee, who's the New York Heat in the Assembly has been referred to the Corporations Committee. And I think he has some concerns about the bill language and what is going to happen to those who are currently on natural gas. As people start to move away from the natural gas system, will there be impacts on those customers that are sort of abandoned to the gas system? As more and more people move away, less and less customers will be there, will have to pay the maintenance and costs of maintaining that system. And so I think we just need to provide the chair with some comfort, and also he needs to understand that currently we're subsidizing the fossil fuel industries by requiring by law that ratepayers pay for the cost of expanding the gas infrastructure. So I think that those things need to be made clear to the chair. He has said that he wants to meet with the advocates in the off session and with the sponsor of the legislation, Assemblywoman Fahey, to discuss amendments that would make it reportable from committee, which gives us some hope that we can get it through the Assembly ideally next year.
Thank you.
All right. I think Craig Kincaid is next. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, so my question is, how are you going to cite all this new renewable energy capacity? I actually have two questions, but that's the first one. So citing often seems to be a very big problem. The Allegheny Cattaraugus County windmills has been going on for 7 years. So there's a lot of difficulty with citing.
Yeah, I think that has been a really big issue. I agree with you. I think the process for citing was tied up for a long time. I think, over, I'm going to say like a 10-year period, they were able to approve like 1 or 2 sites in the whole state. So a really bad record. But they did create within the last couple of years the Office of Renewable Energy Siting. And they have had a much better track record of getting projects cited and approved. I think it might be like 2 or 3 years at this point, and they've already approved about 23 sites. So exponential growth in that siting, and so we'll see if that continues to move forward in that way.
The second question deals with regulations. On a national scale, I hear a lot about regulations slowing things down. On a state scale, has there been things done, or is that not a problem in New York State for regulations for everything from energy efficiency to like building improvements to siting to?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's been a real there's such a diversity of actions happening where you have some cities like the city of Berkeley saying that they want to electrify all new construction, and then you have other states prohibiting their cities or municipalities from electrifying new construction or banning fossil fuels in any way. And so I think there's it really depends on which locality you're at. And then, the city of Berkeley created these regulations to electrify new construction, and then they were found that they were preempted by the federal court, finding in I think the Ninth Circuit said that basically they could not do that because they were preempted by the federal government from regulating appliance standards. And so that doesn't bode well. New York has passed similar legislation on a state level. If there's a challenge to that law, then there could be Second Circuit determination, and then ultimately maybe that goes to the Supreme Court. So to answer your question, I think there's really a lot of diversity on like what states are doing and what municipalities are doing, and even within New York State, many municipalities have kind of moved forward with adopting the New York Stretch Code or electrifying their buildings in some way as well.
Cool. All right, Bob, I think you're next. Unmute. Okay.
Mike, I was wondering, we've been talking about the increase of renewable sources, wind and solar, and I'm just wondering about what do you see as far as transmission lines, the hookups from these facilities to the grid? How is that proceeding? Are there dockets or are there proceedings before the Public Service Commission or something addressing this?
Yes, I know that getting renewable energy systems integrated into the existing power grid has proven difficult, and there's a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of hoops that have to be jumped through, and I think it's too burdensome at this point, and I think that there is a real focused effort on streamlining that process so that renewable energy generating facilities will be able to integrate into the energy grid in a much more streamlined manner. But I think that is an outstanding issue.
And is there anything the Sierra Club can do to get involved in that? Or at what level?
Yeah, I think, and I'm not sure about this, so I don't want to give you bad information, but I think that there are proceedings at the PSC related to this, and if that is true, then you would be able to submit comments in those proceedings in support of streamlining that process.
Thank you.
All right, Alan.
Yeah, thank you, Michael, for your kind of unraveling of some of the complications of all this. I think it really is very helpful. We out here in Western New York are battling opposition to renewables all the time. There, you may have noticed, come to law school here, it's a pretty conservative part of the state. And we've had some victories recently and some disappointments. But what I really wanted to ask you about is there's another bill I think is extremely important. The EJA, Energy Efficiency Something and Jobs Act. And one reason this came to my attention is one of our local senators, who's a self-styled progressive, but curiously unsupportive of renewable energy on any scale but rooftop. He's saying now that his constituents are saying, oh, but if I electrify my home, then I have to upgrade my panel. And we know there are great rebates for that, but we're having to spread the word to people because that's not a meaningful obstacle to upgrading. So along with the HEAT Act, I think we really have to push the EJA Act, which also prepares homes for electrification by upgrading insulation, which is a huge issue out here in Western New York, and mold reduction, so on. So I know everyone on this call votes, but we really have to get out the vote in the next elections and make sure we have a solid legislature, and when it comes to that, Congress and presidential administration, because some of these gains could be undone if we're not careful. So I just wanted to say, you know, energy, we really need to spread the word as the Sierra Club that there are many rebates that make electrification affordable and lower electricity costs. And, you know, thanks to the excellent handouts you have in your organization for making that clear to people.
Thank you. And yeah, I just would echo that the IRA does provide, you know, good incentives, you know, tax credits and rebates for those types of upgrades. And I just, one thing you mentioned, I think, you know, as we were advocating for electrification this year, I think there was, we did need some like support from like Western New York. I think, you know, National Fuel has been doing a lot of work, you know, on promoting disinformation and phone calls and like
billboards even. It's amazing.
Yeah, and so I think if we can collaborate with you, those who are out there in Western New York, on focusing our efforts, I think that would be a great idea.
Right. Thanks.
Great. Stuart.
Hi, thanks, Michael. I think I understand that your website keeps track of the incentives, and I'm waiting for the incentive to upgrade to a induction stove. Do you know about any incentives like that that are either coming along or exist in New York State?
Yeah. So I'm just gonna put in the chat here our website, and then I'm also gonna I'm just gonna pull something up real quick.
You need to share the screen again?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just gonna grab it and then I will share the screen with you. All right.
Yeah, I think that's in your handbook. I think I remember seeing something like that in the handbook that you guys have on that website. I want to say it was 30%.
Here we go.
Okay.
So this is the residential energy efficiency tax credit, which is retroactive. It goes, it's back to 2022. And you can see here, it's a 30% cap tax credit for residential efficiency and electrification upgrades up to $32,000 per year. And you can see there's an annual credit for other upgrades for up to $1,200 for insulation and electrical panels. You can get $600 towards that. And these are, uncapped 30% tax credit for rooftop solar, battery storage, and geothermal heating, as well as electrical panel upgrade. With the electrical panel upgrade, it seems as though it has to be in conjunction with and enables eligible other energy installation. So like if you're updating your panel for instance, with a heat pump water heater or a heat pump, then that you would get the credit for that.
Is this a state credit or a federal? Or
This
both?
is federal. This is a federal tax credit from the IRA.
Yeah, but nothing on induction stoves, which is what the question was.
Right.
Because I couldn't find any tax credits for induction stoves either, unless yeah.
You know what? I can send you guys a copy of the manual that I actually printed off from the Electrify Everything from your website. And I'm pretty sure they address it. I believe it's a 30%, similar to a solar panel or a heat pump. It would be 30% of the cost. And you can only, claim so much per year. Obviously, there's limits on this. So when you look in the manual, you'll see they give examples of how families plan this over the next 10 years. And that way, like 1 year, you might get the electric car and get a rebate. Next year, you can put in an induction stove, get a rebate. Next year, you might do the solar panels, get a rebate. So you can do it, like it kind of gives you a plan of how to do it over the course of time, which is lovely. So I think, Craig, you have another question?
Okay, I do have a comment, and that is that induction stoves have decreased in price a lot compared to like 2 years ago. But of course, maybe that just happened to be the store I was walking through and what they told me. My question is in regards to my company was interested in installing EV chargers for cars. And about 5 years ago, there was much greater incentives. And so the total cost for us to have 10 ports would have been like under $10,000 for the wires and everything. But now the price is around 40,000 because of those tax credits, or those, I think it was NYSERDA, thank you. Rebates ran out. I think it was like $10,000 per charger that would have made it. Is there something like that coming back? Because that's something that's, I was in charge of that project, but it kind of fell through when the cost went up. And my coworkers and managers are asking me about that.
I'm not sure. Nothing comes to mind at the moment. I can do some research and follow up with Ellen.
I would think contacting someone at NYSERDA might be the best thing. My guess is that was pre-pandemic. And after the pandemic, I can tell you everything went way up in price. Everything construction-wise, did. Bob, you have a comment or a question?
Just a comment. I know National Grid locally, Craig, was at a program that was aiding companies with these installations. So I don't know if you want to check with them, if you could tie in with them somehow. But I do know that was going on, I think, last year. And if you don't mind, I just wanted to mention, since this is an energy call, and this is the last week of the assembly, Roger Downs, I posted this on the right, has asked us to make some calls to Carl Heastie to promote this planned offshore wind transmission act, which may pass and which would make it easier for this year for transmission lines from offshore wind to be installed and hooked up. Any parkland would be restored, but it's kind of important. I think this kind of fell through the cracks this year, and he had asked that if possibly you could call Beastie, and the bill number's up there, 87764. So thank you.
Oh,
Sorry.
good.
Yeah.
That was an assembly bill, right?
Assembly,
877.
A 7764.
Okay, great. All right, Joe.
Yeah, Michael, are the charts available and can Janet send them out to us? That you just presented some, I try to write down some of the stuff, but it was
Yeah, let me see. I can put the PDF in the chat.
Okay, that'd be great. And I'll pull that up.
Sometimes it's a little difficult to find a chat, even though you try to save it. So I'd recommend also simply going to the Rewiring America website, which has just an immense amount of really
Yeah,
user-friendly information.
I would agree with Ellen on that. I mean, you could spend literally 3 hours on that website. There's so much good information there. All right. Let's see what time. We are at 7:34. It looks like Chris has one more question. Chris, would you mind if we, at this point, just had you email Michael with your question and Michael can maybe respond back to you? Because I think he left us his contact information. That would be great because I know some people have to get off now. Michael, I just want to say thank you so much. I'm the chair of the local Sierra Club Niagara group. And thanks to Ellen for making this arrangement because this has been very, very informative. We really value your knowledge and what Rewiring America is doing. I mean, they are absolutely answering the questions that we get all the time from people. So that's wonderful. And the first thing people think of is the money. They do. They think, how much is this going to cost? And am I going to get reimbursed for this? Can I get
And the
any
fossil
break?
fuel industry is working very hard on saying, oh, this is going to take all your money. And
Right.
I'd like to add my thanks and also say that we have people from really all over the state on this call, which is fantastic. So thanks to all our members and supporters in other regions.
Yes. So thank you, Michael. Really
Thank you.
great
Thank you all.
job. Great job. And I guess that's it. We are going to be taking a break for July and August. We will not have an environmental series those 2 months. Enjoy your summer and we'll come back with something in the fall. So,
and as I said sorry, Janet, as I said at
Sure.
the outset, there's still daylight, at least in Western New York. So you can still take a walk outside.
That's right.
Happy
Happy
solstice.
summer solstice to everybody. Thanks so much.